I was halfway through fixing a client's disaster contract, one the CEO had accidentally signed without reading, when he burst into the bullpen grinning like a man who just found a $100 bill in a pair of pants he never paid for. "Another fire put out by our very own Rebecca," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like he hadn't just spent the morning trashing me to the VP of product. Honestly, where would we be without her? I knew the answer, screwed. You'd be screwed, Mark, and deep down you know it. I muttered something polite, spun back to my screen, and kept working. Because that's what I did, make broken things look functional and clueless men look competent. My inbox was a graveyard of mismanaged vendor relationships and botched integrations I'd quietly salvaged without so much as a Starbucks gift card. And like clockwork, credit would go to someone who once asked me if APIs were a kind of pasta. No one at this startup noticed what I really did. But someone outside did. A few weeks earlier, I'd posted a short update on LinkedIn, successfully restructured a legacy client system into a streamlined delivery pipeline, recovered $1.2 million in lost annual value. That was it. No company name, no drama, just a breadcrumb. Internally, it got nothing. But externally, 3 private messages. 2 from recruiters, 1 from someone much more interesting, one of our investors. It read, "Love how you frame impact. Would enjoy hearing more over coffee sometime." I didn't reply right away. I wasn't sure if it was harmless networking or something else. But the message stayed unread in my inbox for 3 days, pulsing like a secret I hadn't told yet. Back at work, I was the go-to-fix-it girl. Marketing fumbled a client pitch? Rebecca. Sales botched a renewal? Rebecca. The CTO's new product roadmap was literally a Google Doc with 5 bullet points and a smiley face? You guessed it, Rebecca. And yet no raise, no title change, no budget. When I asked, I got a smile and some canned line about being the glue that holds us together, and we don't want to dilute your superpowers with hierarchy. Translation, keep doing 3 jobs and stay quiet about it. So I stopped asking. I stopped hoping, and I started writing. LinkedIn became my outlet, not in a dramatic, I just want to thank my haters way. Just clean, professional dispatches. Micro summaries of what I actually did, couched in language only the right people would understand. Recovered dormant accounts after the CEO drunkenly insulted a major client at a launch party. Rebuilt internal trust systems after HR buried a harassment complaint. Stabilized the portfolio during transition when 2 co-founders ghosted post-funding and I had to personally call investors to keep them calm. No one inside the building cared, but the people funding the circus, they noticed. So yeah, while I'm telling this, let me ask something real quick. If you're listening and thinking, damn, I've worked with a Rebecca, or maybe you are a Rebecca, hit that subscribe button and toss a like our way. Seriously, 95% of folks forget to, and it really fuels the team keeping these stories alive. Okay, back to it, so I kept writing, quietly, strategically. 1 post a week, always late at night when the founders were too busy chasing buzzwords to pay attention. I started seeing patterns in who liked them. A managing director here, a VC partner there, someone with family office in their title. The kinds of people who don't engage unless they mean to. One liked to post about how internal misalignment often reveals itself through staff burnout. Another messaged me after I wrote about protecting delivery continuity when leadership is volatile. And just like that, I stopped being invisible. Not to them, but to Mark. I was still the smiling fix-it fairy who made his bad choices go away. I remember the moment I knew I wasn't going to stay much longer. It was during a quarterly call where the CEO bragged about hiring lean and efficient. He called us warriors, said we were in the trenches together. Meanwhile, I hadn't had a vacation in 18 months and had to expense my own parking pass because finance kept losing the form. That night, I updated my headline, turning dysfunction into delivery. Guiding recovery from trust deficits. Building what others break. It wasn't passive-aggressive. It was aggressive-aggressive, wrapped in professionalism, and it worked. By the time I got my next message from an investor, it wasn't just curiosity, it was concern. Off the record, how bad is the culture? They asked. I paused, took a deep breath, and started to tell the truth. Carefully, quietly, 1 sentence at a time. All hands at our company meant exactly that. All hands on deck to hold the CEO's ego upright while it collapsed under the weight of his own delusions. Friday morning, 10:03 a.m., and we were already 3 minutes into Mark's weekly sermon on disruption. He was in rare form, sleeves rolled up, AirPods still in like he just got off a very important call trademark, and pacing like a youth pastor trying to sell God to atheists. Then came the line. Some folks around here seem more interested in building their personal brands than building this company, he said, gaze casually sweeping the Zoom grid. I won't name names, you know who you are. The silence that followed was the professional equivalent of a fart in church. Everyone heard it. No one moved. I didn't flinch. I didn't look up. I just sipped my lukewarm coffee and stared at a spreadsheet I'd already finished 2 hours ago. But inside, my stomach twisted into a sailor's knot. That line wasn't just a jab. It was a warning shot, and the bullet had my name etched in Helvetica bold. I muted myself, turned off my camera, and stared at my own reflection in the black laptop screen. He knew, Not everything, but enough. A few of my recent LinkedIn posts had picked up unexpected traction. Post about silent retention crises got 14 likes from people with job titles like Capital Partner and Strategic Allocation Director. Another post about leadership that listens versus leadership that punishes dissent had been shared by someone in our Series B investor group. I never tagged the company, never mentioned names, but Mark had always been a little too obsessed with control and a little too insecure to miss a vibe. And I'd clearly set off a few. The call ended with the usual performative pep talk about being family and weathering storms together. Half the team clapped with dead eyes. The other half had already mentally clocked out. I closed Zoom, and there it was. A new message. From someone named Ariana, managing director at Stratus Hill Capital, the fund that had dumped $12M into us just before we pivoted to AI-enabled supply chain intelligence, whatever the hell that meant. I'd only ever seen her name on quarterly updates. Never met her, never expected to. Subject, enjoying your voice. Message, Rebecca, your recent posts have been thoughtful and quietly powerful. I'd love to hear more if you're open to a short chat sometime next week, off the record. No agenda. I stared at it for a full 60 seconds. Then I shut my laptop, walked to the kitchen, poured another cup of office-burnt coffee, and let the emotional cocktail settle. Equal parts terror, thrill, and rage, because now it was real. This wasn't just venting anymore. This was something else. Back at my desk, I drafted a reply, nothing eager, just a calm, measured, thank you, happy to connect. Let me know what works for you. Then I stared out the window. I'd spent 2 years holding this place together with duct tape and willpower, watching as others got promoted for my work, watching as bonuses vanished into budget reallocation, watching the CEO refer to my insights in meetings without giving me credit. As we've been discussing internally, he'd say, parroting my own damn strategy deck. And now, one of the people who funded him was asking me for insight, not because I was loud, but because I was noticed. And that was worse for him than anything I could have screamed at an all-hands. I checked Slack, no DMs from Mark. But the VP of Product had posted a generic shout-out to Rebecca for jumping on that renewal call last minute. In the public channel. Cute, little damage control moment. Someone probably told him I looked tense after the meeting. They had no idea. That weekend I didn't post. I didn't update anything. I just let the digital water settle. But on Monday I made one tiny change. My headline now read, helping leaders see what their teams already know. Subtle, sharp, loaded, let them sweat. The first call was scheduled for 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Just late enough to avoid raising eyebrows, just early enough to not look desperate. I sat in my car, parked 3 blocks from my apartment, windows cracked, trying to ignore the rising panic that I was about to ruin my life for a 15-minute chat with a woman I'd never met, one whose fund practically owned a third of my employer. But when Ariana's voice came through, it wasn't sharp or distant like I'd braced for. It was warm, curious. The kind of voice that doesn't waste words but pays attention when you do. I know this is out of the blue, she said, but I've learned to listen when someone signals signal through noise. I laughed before I could stop myself. I wasn't trying to signal anything. Then you're even better at it than I thought. What followed wasn't an interview, wasn't even a fact-finding mission. It was a conversation. About culture, leadership, how startups lose their way between seed and Series B. I didn't name names. I didn't whine. I just described the tension, how projects were prioritized by whoever shouted loudest, how accountability vanished up the chain, how the team morale was quietly rotting under performative optimism. She asked one question that cracked something open in me. Why haven't you been promoted? I froze. Then laughed again, this time bitter. Honestly, because I don't yell, because I make things look easy. Because when stuff breaks, I fix it before anyone above me notices it broke in the first place. A pause. Then she said, that's not a culture problem. That's a leadership problem. For a moment, I didn't feel crazy or dramatic or difficult. I just felt seen. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling like it owed me back pay. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even plotting. I was just recalibrating, shifting, moving out of survival mode and into strategy. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accuracy. The next day, I accepted a few more coffee chats, some with angel investors, some with platform advisors I'd never heard of. All of them framed the same way: curiosity, context, no judgment. They weren't fishing. We're listening, and so I gave them perspective. Not gossip, not venting. Just high-altitude clarity about what it felt like to be the only adult in a room full of founders pretending to be boy geniuses with broken compasses. I even found myself defending Mark more than I expected. He's not evil. He's just afraid someone smarter than him might get credit. And I think that's why the culture here has calcified around flattery instead of outcomes. One of them, a soft-spoken guy named Jonah who apparently manages a $50M seed fund, said, if you ever decided to leave, I'd like to help where I can. You're what I call a quiet architect. Founders build noise, people like you build value. I wrote that phrase down, quiet architect. That one stayed with me. That weekend, I changed my LinkedIn headline again, turning dysfunction into delivery. Quiet architect of outcomes. I didn't overthink it. I didn't need to, because I was starting to realize something they hadn't. The more visible I became to people outside this company, the less they could pretend I didn't matter inside it. I wasn't just updating my LinkedIn. I was building an alternative record, one that didn't need their approval or their permission, only their eventual surprise. I knew the post was going to rattle someone the second I hit publish. It was short, controlled, measured. In high-growth environments, retention often hinges not on compensation, but on recognition. Silent contributors eventually become invisible ones until they're gone. No company name, no names at all, just a truth. And yet, within an hour, it had picked up likes from 2 venture partners, a CFO from a fintech firm, and someone listed only as strategic advisor private capital. Then came the comment. From an anonymous account that had no photo, no real details, just a post that read, "Wouldn't want the wrong people to see this. Careful, subtle as a brick through glass." By the next morning, I could feel it, the shift in air pressure around the office. People whispering when I passed, Slack messages going quiet when I entered a channel. And by 10:15 a.m., my calendar pinged, quick sync mark, CEO, no agenda, no invite notes, just doom dressed in iCal gray. I walked in calmly. Sat down across from him, arms relaxed. Back straight, spine made of steel wrapped in beige professionalism. He didn't look up right away, too busy pretending to finish reading something, probably a Medium article about leading with vision. Then he leaned back, folded his arms in that smug little "I'm about to offer you a warning but disguise it as coaching" posture. "Rebecca," he said, tone syrupy, "I've noticed you've been very active online lately." I said nothing. Just let the silence breathe. Let him get uncomfortable in it. "I've had some VPs flag a few things. People are getting the sense you might be, exploring," he said, drawing out that last word like it tasted bitter. "Exploring what?" I asked, all innocence. He laughed without humor. "Come on, you're a smart woman, you know what I mean, updating your LinkedIn, making those posts, engaging with investors." Still, I said nothing. Finally, he leaned forward, voice low. "Are you planning to jump ship?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I never said I was." He blinked, then smiled like a man who just stepped on a rake and was trying to pretend it didn't hurt. "Well," he said, straightening up, "just remember who gave you this opportunity." That one got me, the audacity of it. This opportunity? The opportunity to hold together a house of cards built by ego and spray-painted KPIs? I nodded politely. "Of course. I remember everything." I left his office without asking what the meeting was really about, because I already knew he was scared, and that meant I wasn't invisible anymore. But now I was being watched. For the next week, I tightened the screws. No posts, no comments. I went digital dark, let him sweat. Internally, I did my job better than ever, delivered ahead of schedule, smiled in meetings, documented everything. And outside the walls, I sent a message to Ariana. Just one image. A screenshot of my Q2 bonus notice, target $12,000. Paid $9,000, no explanation, no rant, just the document. 10 minutes later, she replied, "Understood, we'll take it from here." That was all. I didn't know what they'd do or how fast, but for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel stuck. I felt dangerous, not because I was reckless, because I had receipts and they had eyes. The rumor came in sideways, delivered not by someone I trusted, but by someone who used to trust me before they realized trust doesn't climb the corporate ladder, it gets trampled under it. It was after hours, and I was already 2 whiskeys into my Thursday when I got the text. "Careful, Mark's talking to HR about social media violations." Heard him use the phrase "for cause," heads up. No name, just a burner number I recognized from our old offsite retreat Slack thread. Only reason I believed it? Mark had used that exact same phrase 6 months earlier when he fired our lead engineer after she dared to suggest we test the product before launching it to a client. For cause was his favorite knife, dull, rusty, and waved around to scare the interns. But it still cut. I sat there, drink sweating in my hand, staring out my window at the glowing skyline. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't scared. I was furious, cold furious. The kind of fury that hardens you, clarifies you. That smug little twerp was going to try and throw me under the bus using some vague clause buried in our 20-page culture agreement, the one legal updated after that investor called out our Glassdoor reviews. Section 4.3, employee communication that may be interpreted as damaging to the brand image. Interpret this, Mark. I opened my laptop, typed a post. Short, sharp, surgical. In some company cultures, the truth becomes a liability. Silence is rewarded, insight is punished, and those who challenge dysfunction are quietly framed as uncooperative. I stared at it, let it simmer, then added one last line. Sometimes you get fired before you get free. From The Art of Holding the Line, I tagged the book. I clicked post, and I walked away. Not even 10 minutes later, the first like rolled in from Thomas Breyer, partner at Stratus Hill Capital. His name wasn't just on our cap table, it was on our founder's wall, etched into the custom plaque from our series A Close. He'd never liked any of my posts before. I didn't smile. I grinned, because that one action told me everything. They were watching, closely, and not just me. By morning, Slack was ice cold. People weren't atting me anymore. Meetings got mysteriously rescheduled. My access to Salesforce was temporarily suspended for maintenance. I heard 2 coworkers whispering in the hallway. One said comms audit, the other just said Rebecca. Let them watch. Let them crawl through every file, every post, every email where I turned their collapse into functionality. Let them build their case because I had already built mine. It wasn't in a folder. It wasn't in a drive. It was in the eyes of the people above them, the ones who funded this circus and were now looking past the ringmaster. And I knew something Mark didn't. You don't need to shout the truth. You just need the right people to see it. That day, I updated my profile again. Subtle tweak. Just one line in my About section. Championing outcomes in environments where credit often disappears, but the blame always finds a host. Later that night, I got a private message from someone on the advisory board. Not a partner, not a founder, just a quiet power player who rarely spoke unless money was involved. Message read, your latest post? That quote, the board saw it. One of them asked if you were signaling something. I didn't answer. Then another message followed, but I hope you keep writing. You're telling a story we've been trying to hear. And just like that, the setup was tight. Mark thought he was cornering me, but he never realized I was the one drawing the lines. It was raining that morning. Not the kind of romanticized cinematic rain you see in startup ad reels, but the real Ohio kind, wet, blunt, and unapologetically sideways. I arrived 10 minutes early, as always. Mark's assistant, who hadn't looked me in the eye for a week, mumbled that he'd like to see you in his office. No calendar invite, no HR rep, no witnesses. Classic. The air in his office was different, pressurized, stale. He didn't stand when I walked in, didn't motion to the chair across from him. He just stared at his screen until I shut the door behind me. Then, without looking up, he said, "Sit." I didn't. He sighed and swiveled in his chair, folding his hands like a game show host about to announce the wrong answer. "You've been updating LinkedIn too much," he said, tone flat. "You're clearly job hunting." I said nothing. I'd prepared for every variation of the scene. That was the one he opened with, amateur hour. So, continued, leaning back like a man confident in the comfort of his own delusion, "We're terminating your contract. Effective immediately." I blinked once. He expected outrage, begging, maybe tears, something he could call emotional instability in the exit notes. Instead, I smiled. Not the wide, gracious kind, just the barest flick of a smirk at the corner of my mouth. The kind you give a man who just stepped into the trap he laid for someone else. "I update it daily." I said, voice smooth. "It's part of staying visible in our industry. Isn't that what you always preach?" Visibility? Mark's face twitched. Briefly. "I'll need your badge," he said. I handed it over. He reached for a paper folder like this was some sort of formal transition. But I was already turning. No need for folder theatrics. No fake thank you. No handshake. I walked out the door, crossed the bullpen under a dozen pairs of suddenly fascinated eyes, and went straight to my desk. The packing took 6 minutes. My plant, my notebook, the mug I got at our last holiday party that said teamwork makes the dream work. Oh, the bitter irony. My Slack access had already been revoked, so I didn't say goodbye. I didn't text anyone, not because I was broken, because I was done. I carried the box down the stairs myself, didn't take the elevator. I needed those 37 steps to absorb the burn, the churn, the last flickers of fury still smoldering behind my ribs. I didn't scream, I didn't shake, I just got in my car and exhaled, once. Then I opened LinkedIn, edited my bio, former company name, looking forward to what's next. I didn't say why I left, didn't need to. The silence was the story. Within 15 minutes, the post had 4 likes, 2 investors, 1 former client, 1 anonymous account that had never engaged before but always viewed my posts. I sat there, car engine still running, watching the numbers shift. Then I shut my laptop, leaned back in the seat, and let the rain drum out the final applause. Serenity? No, it was the eye of a storm I hadn't even started yet. 2 hours, that's how long it took. From the moment I stepped out of the building and into the storm-drenched parking lot to the first thunderclap over Mark's porcelain empire. I was sitting in a booth at a little diner across the street, the kind of place with cracked vinyl seats and a waitress who calls everyone Han without needing a reason. My phone was flipped face down on the table beside a plate of cold fries and a half-drunk coffee that had long since turned bitter. I wasn't scrolling. I wasn't refreshing. I wasn't waiting because I knew. At 1:12 p.m., a text came in from someone I hadn't spoken to since our series of funding round, one of the junior partners from a boutique VC firm that had originally been pulled in to syndicate the tail end of our investment stack. Barely 30, whip-smart, and far more observant than anyone gave him credit for. Just a heads up, Series B call canceled. Something spooked the lead. Terms are being reevaluated. I stared at it for a moment, not with glee, not with vindication, with clarity. This wasn't just a tremor. It was the beginning of an aftershock. 30 minutes later, the whispers began to echo through the corporate grapevine. Screenshots leaked into private channels. Calendars were suddenly emptied. Emails went unanswered. Someone noticed the CEO's calendar had changed from Series B signature call to emergency board check-in. A sales lead posted a cryptic tweet and then immediately deleted it. A client call was abruptly rescheduled with no new date at this time. By 2:47 p.m., the nail drove in. Stratus Hill Capital, our primary backer, our golden goose, formally pulled the term sheet. The language was sterile, surgical. in light of recent indications of internal misalignment and unresolved leadership concerns. You're pausing forward movement on the Series B transaction until further notice. This decision reflects our commitment to funding stability, transparency, and sound governance. Translated, they smelled the rot and they weren't going to touch it. By 3:10 p.m., the panic had fully taken hold. My ex-coworkers started texting. Not the loyalists, those had gone silent, but the quiet ones. The ones who'd always given me a nod in meetings, or stayed a few seconds longer in Zoom just to say thanks after I'd untangled someone else's mess. Something's happening. Did you know about this? Mark looks like he's about to throw up. One message just said, "You okay?" I was more than okay, I was free. At 3:26 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Message read, "It happened. You were heard. No name, no context, just that." But I knew who it was from the cadence, the calm. One of the junior partners I'd spoken to in those back-channel chats. One who'd asked how I managed to keep delivering results in such a chaotic environment. One who'd once told me quietly that some startups look healthy on paper but are bleeding out inside. I'd never asked for anything, never made demands, just offered perspective. One post, one sentence, one screenshot at a time. I didn't respond to the message, didn't need to. Instead, I leaned back, sipped my now ice-cold coffee, and watched the rain let up outside the window. The sun was pushing through like it had nothing to prove. Neither did I. And somewhere in some boardroom bathed in glass and ego, Mark was staring at a blinking cursor in a funding email that had gone from congratulations to "we regret to inform." I didn't take him down. I just let the truth breathe. By Monday, the building no longer echoed with that forced startup optimism. You know the kind. Fake enthusiasm glued together by Lacroix and mandatory Slack reactions. It was gone, replaced with door slams, low voices behind glass walls, and the distinct stench of impending collapse, the kind that doesn't roar in but creeps like mold under the floorboards. Mark had stopped showing up to stand-ups. Instead, he was barricaded in his office, barking at legal and demanding to know who talked. He'd already accused the VP of product, the director of ops, even one of the engineers who once dared to suggest we back up the server more than once a month. His paranoia wasn't surgical, it was sloppy. Wild accusations, panicked texts, after-hours calls that reeked of desperation and cold sweat. His assistant? She quit Tuesday morning. No notice. Just left her badge on his desk with a post-it note that said, "Good luck." I almost sent her flowers. HR tried to pretend they had no idea why I'd been terminated. "Policy review pending" was their new catchphrase. One person told me off-record that they'd been asked to retroactively find something that would justify Mark's decision. But every clause they dug up was full of holes. The social media line item in the handbook? Vague, never enforced, not a single documented infraction. Meanwhile, the board had caught the scent of blood in the water. By Wednesday, an actual board representative had flown in from New York. Not a call. In person, which in our world is code for someone's about to get sacrificed. They didn't announce the meeting, didn't hold it in the big glass-walled conference room. It happened in legal's office, door shut, blinds drawn. The only clue it occurred at all came from the legal associate who quietly booked a hotel near the office just in case this runs long. But the real detonation didn't come from a Zoom call. It came from the trash. Specifically, my email trash folder. I hadn't told anyone I'd left it there. It wasn't a manifesto. No angry monologue. Just a clean, 3-page document titled, "Exit Memo Rebecca Hawthorne Final Doc XCOM," factual, timestamps, names, a list of incidents, each with a brief summary and attached email threads, a spreadsheet with missed bonuses. A Slack screenshot from the time Mark joked that diversity hires are great until they start asking for raises. And at the bottom, one sentence, "This document is not intended for external distribution unless legally compelled." But should the question ever arise, I'd rather be thorough than quiet. Someone in IT had flagged the file during an account archive. Someone else in legal read it, and now the board was reading it too. What followed wasn't chaos, not the loud kind anyway. No screaming, no press releases, just decay. Department heads began requesting clarity on leadership direction. Slack channels started showing signs of fracture. Teams creating private groups, deleting old threads, removing admins from shared workspaces. 2 key clients quietly asked to pause upcoming contracts. Recruiters I hadn't spoken to in months messaged me with one question: "Did something happen over there?" The cracks weren't hypothetical anymore. They were operational. Revenue wasn't the issue. Trust was, and Mark? He was pacing the office like a condemned man still waiting for his final meal. The best part? I wasn't even in the building. I was at home, feet up, coffee warm, laptop open, watching the edifice fall without touching a single brick. The boardroom was glass-walled, high-ceilinged, and suddenly silent in all the wrong ways. No one wanted to speak first. Not after the term sheet was yanked. Not after the senior partner from Stratus Hill canceled the fundraising roadshow and showed up in person with his coat still damp from the plane. Mark sat at the head of the table, gray at the temples and sweating through his quarter zip. He looked smaller now, not physically but less somehow, like someone had dimmed the brightness on him. "Let's be clear," he said, trying to sound calm, but missing by a mile. We were blindsided. Whatever concerns you're hearing from your teams are exaggerated, misinterpreted. HR is handling the Rebecca situation internally. That's enough, came the voice from the far end of the table. Thomas Breyer, lead investor. Normally unreadable, today, ice. He reached into his leather portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of my LinkedIn post, the one I'd written just days before Mark fired me. Sometimes the most dangerous dysfunction isn't the one that breaks things, but the one that repackages broken systems as normal and punishes those who try to tell the truth. Breyer laid it flat on the table like a courtroom exhibit. She didn't jump ship, he said, voice even. She was trying to signal us, quietly, carefully, and you ignored it. Worse, you punished her for it. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. With respect, Thomas, this is one person's narrative, and while she was competent, he had reason to believe she was sowing instability. Some of her posts bordered on insubordination. HR flagged them. Breyer stood, just like that. Stop, he said. Please, just stop. Mark's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Breyer picked up the paper again, folded it with precision, and slid it back into his folder. You were given someone who quietly turned dysfunction into performance, who kept delivering while your leadership team played musical chairs with blame. She never asked for a raise, never asked for a title. She asked to be heard. He looked around the room. No one here listened. The silence was complete now. No one even breathed. Breyer continued. She gave us a chance to fix the problem from the inside. You fired her for being visible, for having a voice. Then came the final blow. Our funding follows trust, he said, buttoning his coat. And she's the only one here who had any. He left the room. Mark didn't follow. No one did. They just sat there, frozen, as the glass walls echoed with the quiet consequences of being exactly who they thought they'd never become. Across town, I was sipping a black coffee at a quiet cafe. No laptop, just a paperback and a view of the street. My phone buzzed once. A new message. From Stratus Hill Capital, subject. Portfolio Advisory Board Opportunity Body. We'd be honored to have your voice in the room. Let us know if you're open to discussing. I looked at it, smiled, and tapped accept. No fanfare, no speech. Just one quiet woman with receipts, resolve, and finally, respect. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.